The Return, Chapter 8, Betrayals. It was unusual for Johnson to find himself speechless, but the ride home was quiet, silent, especially once Saam fell asleep. Saam was so obviously exhausted, pushed so far beyond what he could endure, that Johnson counted it a victory that he hadn't killed anyone. Doubtless Oliver would call him later, have something to say on the subject, but under the circumstances he was just grateful that nothing had taken place that could not be repaired. He thought for one brief moment about carrying Saam upstairs like a child, then gently touched his shoulder to waken him. His sleepy face touched the Secret Service agent in a way that he would have found difficult to put into words. He felt a deep responsibility for the cherub, as if he were his grown child, too old to control, but not too old to worry about. The atmosphere in the apartment had changed somehow. Something was different. Saam felt it too. Doubtless the removal of a well-liked and trusted housemaid, turned traitor, had disturbed everyone. Perhaps that was it. Saam tried to go straight to bed, but Lily shrieked with happiness when he walked in. "We're going to play in the pool. You have to come. You have to." Louis was already wearing his swim shorts, Bermuda shorts in garish colours, and he heartily joined in. "Yes, come." Why was he so very hearty? Was there something that didn't ring true about his enthusiasm? Saam hugged Nadia and felt a change there too. She welcomed him, but there was a slight stiffness, a formality that had not been there before. Saam wanted to melt into her, draw comfort from her warmth, but released her, obedient to her wishes. She was pulling away from him. He could feel it. Nicky threw a pair of trunks to him. Groggily he caught them and followed them to the lift. Johnson stayed behind. He wanted to debrief the men who had removed the in-house spy and check on the rest of the household staff. Then he would sweep the place for bugs. After that, he might take the time to think about why the mood of the home was so off. They played a game together in the pool. One swimmer wore a blindfold and tried to catch any other player by sound only. Tash was quietly reluctant to be blindfolded, so Saam took his first turn. Of course, Saam's hearing made the game rather easier for him, and he was never blindfolded for long. But the game was noisy, boisterous, full of laughter. Lily squealed, and eventually even Tash laughed out loud and begged to be allowed to wear the mask. When they showered, still wearing their swimsuits, Nicky touched Saam on the back, on his shoulder. Saam turned. "Is that a bullet hole? That scar? Was that a bullet?" Saam nodded. "Wait, is that... How many times did you get shot?" If anything, Saam looked embarrassed. Sad, perhaps. 3 times. He touched the shoulder, a mark on his thigh, another on his flat belly at the side, just where Artem's handprint was beginning to fade. Nadia, who knew the story, nodded to Louis and herded Lily away to the apartment. "He was shot 3 times, trying to protect my first wife, your first mother." Saam stood still, waited. "She wanted to get something from the grocery store. Something trivial, I forget. We could have done very well without it, but she wanted... And it was not a nice place we lived in, so Saam went with her, in his hoodie and gloves." He smiled at the memory. "A man came in who had been sacked a few days before by the store. He came in with an automatic weapon." Saam tilted his head. This was an awful memory for Louis to share. Louis was calm and sad, without the appalling grief they had both suffered at the time.
He walked in and opened fire on everybody in the store. My friend here, he was too far away from the man to do anything else, so he turned his back, tried to shield Anna, to protect her from the bullets by putting his own body in the way.
The silence in the changing room was chilling.
Seconds later, a patrol officer put a bullet in this man's head while he was still firing, put him down like a dog. But it was too late. Sam was down, and 2 of the bullets went straight through him and hit your mother. You sat down and held her, comforted her, while she died.
Lewis stopped. He didn't elaborate any more. He didn't say how he had watched the CCTV, had seen how Sam had sat, cradling the dying woman, how he howled and roared in pain when she finally died in his arms, how in focusing on her, his own neglected gut wound had nearly killed him, how ashamed he was when Lewis found him at the hospital, how bitterly ashamed that he had failed to protect his friend's wife. Lewis smiled at him.
This is why I was so drunk at the christening that my friend had to hold my baby son, and why I will always love this man.
He gave Sam the warmest, deepest hug. Sam returned it, deeply touched. He believed it, all of it. So why did it feel like a death sentence, like a prelude to a betrayal? He was aware of Lewis and Nadia being different with each other, too. They were being careful, as if aware that there were eyes on them. Had he been less tired? As it was, he sat on the massive daybed that ran down the centre of the lounge. Then he lay back and slept. He wasn't aware that Lewis lay down beside him for a while, or that Lily took a picture of the pair of them dozing together. He didn't hear the whispered discussion, Lewis and Nadia, one of them saying, "We have to tell him," the other answering, "He'll know." It was dark when he finally woke. Someone had put a comforter across him. He sat up, still tired, confused and groggy. Where was everyone? He wandered to the kitchen. The low-level emergency lights were on, but nothing else. He stood at the entrance to the kitchen, allowed his sense of smell to gather information for him. Nicky and Tash had raided the fridge and made peanut butter and jam sandwiches. Jelly, Nicky would call it. Strawberry. Extra roasted peanut butter. Lily was in her room. Nadia was in hers. With Lewis. Sam's heart beat hard against his chest. That was what had struck him. They smelled of each other. Not like 2 people who had hugged, like 2 people who... They were together again. And in a moment, the sweet, shy little dream that he had allowed himself, but never admitted to, the idea that Nadia might still care for him, exploded. A man who could not legally marry her, who could not give her children, who legally was not even a man. What had he been thinking of when he said at the meeting, "I'm tired, I'm going home"? When had he been stupid enough to start thinking that this was his home? The following morning it took the rest of the family some time to realize he was gone. They thought he might be sleeping late. He might be in the gym. He might. Eventually Johnson ruefully decided it was his job to know. Not in his room, not in the basement gym or pool. He wasn't answering his phone. Johnson said, "According to the guy on the desk, he went out about 2 a.m. Lewis said, "But it was pouring down." Nadia said, "He knows. I told you he would know. They're hypervigilant, like abused children. They pay attention. Of course he knows." She didn't say ex-slaves, not wishing to make Tash uncomfortable, but it was understood. Johnson, who had picked up the signals himself while Saam slept, was not surprised that Saam had eventually figured it out. He was not happy. "I'll contact him on his comm." "You can do that?" "He won't like it, but I don't like him leaving like this, so we're even." He pulled from his pocket something the size of a thumbnail, which he pushed into the base of his phone. He pressed a few buttons. "Ow. What?" Saam's voice, sleepy and crystal clear. Saam, it's Johnson. I was wondering where you were. Are you okay?" A pause. "Yes, I'm okay. I'll be back later." "Where are you?" Another pause. "I'm with a friend. I'll see you later." Not exactly happy, but at least no longer frightened, Johnson ended the call. He looked at Lewis and Nadia, shrugged. "I guess we wait." He was thinking, "I wonder if he's with Artem." Saam had walked in the rain for a long time. After about an hour, he realized that he was walking towards Artem's tenement. He had never been inside, but he had been in the car once, when Johnson delivered him to his home. He was sure he could find it. He ran for a while. Then he walked some more. By the time he slapped his hand on the door, he was soaked as if he had been in an ice-cold lake, and shivering uncontrollably. There was a human girl in Artem's bed, and he pushed her aside, growling to himself about the noise. 3:30 in the morning, what the fuck? When he opened the door, half expecting some human hard man demanding money, he was shocked to see Saam, soaking wet and cold as a corpse. He stood in the doorway and shuddered, said softly, "I need somewhere to sleep." Saam was silent as Artem pulled him inside and ran to fetch towels. Artem told the girl to leave without a second's hesitation, completely ignoring her replies as she pulled on her underwear. "Wait, is that—" He shut the bedroom door in her face halfway through the sentence. He pulled off Saam's clothes, toweled him hard to make the circulation move, rubbed his soaking hair with another towel. He'd once pulled a body from a water tank. That's what this felt like. Saam seemed to be in shock. "Are you hurt? Did someone hurt you?" Less reticent than Johnson, he wrapped Saam in a duvet and lifted him off his feet, sat him in a chair long enough to make him swallow some coffee with a little brandy, then carried him to his bed. The girl had left at some point. He couldn't say when. He had not noticed. Artem had fucked Saam as hard as he had ever fucked a willing partner. Well, it was difficult to resist a body that sweet. But now he was frightened. Saam looked fragile, like he might break if he was mishandled. Saam curled in on himself and didn't react when Artem put an arm around him. Artem got closer, his body responding as it always did to Saam. What harm could it do? He started to nuzzle the back of Saam's neck. Then he stopped. The carrot didn't move at all. An idea came to him that Saam would not resist, would lie immobile while Artem did whatever he wanted. He would raise no objection. And it would be rape. Artem pulled Saam as close as he could, sharing his body heat with the naked Kerep, and eventually, despite all contrary suggestions from his groin, he fell asleep. A couple of hours later he was aware that Saam had turned to face him, still asleep, the lids not quite covering those glorious golden eyes. He lay against Artem's naked chest in a way that was touching rather than arousing. He looked tragic, like he had been crying. When he woke, Artem was alone in the bed. He could hear that machine working, the one that was meant to dry clothes, but he had never learned how to use it. The coffee machine was running too. It took a couple of minutes, but he found Saam in his gallery. The naked cherub was looking up at the paintings. Fuck, he was beautiful. Artem must have painted him 20 times, but he had never yet come close. Saam looked at him. You know my lips aren't red, right? Artem jerked his shoulders, leered. They could be. Saam gave a tight smile, a little shake of the head, then went to fetch his clothes from the dryer. Dressed, he offered Artem his own coffee. Flinched as if he'd been stung, then said, I'm with a friend. It took a moment, but Artem realized he still had a working comm, something he, not deemed fit to be a fighter, had never owned. And he had called him his friend. He was pulling on his clothes, leaving. Artem searched for a way to detain him. You owe me a favor. Yes, I do, another time. Then he turned and said, Thank you. And he put up his hands, pulled Artem's face down to his own, and kissed him. It was more than a surprise. When they had first met, when Saam had laid the ground rules, kissing was off the table, not negotiable. In fact, Artem had never kissed a willing person. He'd forced it on a couple of unwilling ones, but it wasn't even pleasurable, a waste of time when you could be fucking. It was the softest, sweetest thing he had ever felt. He stooped, allowing it to happen, let the feeling wash over him, and then Saam was gone. He went to fetch his pants and his paints. I hope you will be happy for me, man. Louis was holding him in a bear hug. They had just informed him that they were going to live together again, and as Lily said, Daddy was going to behave himself. You know I love you, right? Yes, I know, Saam said, hugging him hard. They were married. There were children. This was the way it was meant to be. Anything else had been a child's fantasy. Then tell your face. Saam smiled, but Johnson, who knew better than most those little flickers that came across Saam's eyelashes, thought he looked as if he were being tortured. And don't think of moving back to that shitty little apartment of yours. I can't believe you still live in the same rat hole. Saam agreed to stay for a few more days, long enough to be sure that Tash was settled. Then he would get the hell out of there, and nothing would stop him.